Hello, Abby. Thank you for joining us. So our next presenter will be Abby from the School of International Futures and Next Generation Foresight Practitioners. And she'll be presenting on the dream to facilitate the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network made up of 600, mostly under 35s from over 90 countries who are doing work to drive social transformation for a fairer future for current and future generations. So you may start, Abby.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. And I'm also hoping that one of our network members for SIO will be joining us shortly as well. Before I launch into sharing a bit about who we are and what we do, I just wanted to give a very quick introduction to who I am. And then if Fasaya joins us, then I'll also hand over to her as well. So a very quick intro. My name's Abby. I'm based in London. That's where I am today. And I would describe, I thought, rather than saying who we are and what we do, I thought I'd just start by sharing what my purpose is in coming to this work. And I think it's twofold. And I'm going to ask all of you in the chat, actually, just so that I can get a sense of who's in the room, to also share your name, where you're from, and also your core purpose. So name, location, core purpose. Hi, Fasaya. Thanks for joining us. So my core purpose, I think, is twofold. One is addressing the systemic reasons why some people have more access to opportunities, more access to power, more access to have a voice in shaping what their future and the future of the community, their country, their world looks like than others. And how can we address some of that systemic inequality? That's my first core purpose. My second core purpose is that I'm a complete networks geek. Really, when I say networks, very interested in impact networks and what are the conditions needed to bring together organizations, individuals, institutions who on the face of it may have very different opinions about the way that the world should work and how some complex issues that we're facing can be solved, and what are the conditions that bring people together to collaborate. And that's what I've based the last 10 years of my work on, and which I'll speak a bit more about in a minute. But for Sayo, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself, and we'd like to invite everyone to also share their name, location, and purpose in the chat too.
Thanks, Abby. Hello, everyone. My name is Fisayo Hoyewale, and I'm joining you from Lagos, Nigeria. And in the past 3 years, I have been working in the space of futures, actually at the intersection of futures, agriculture, as well as meaningful youth engagement. And I'm excited to be here sharing this platform with you all alongside Abby. Over to you now, Abby.
Perfect. I'm hoping people will get warmed up and share a bit in the chat as well. But before we start by sharing who the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network is and how it relates to the UN's Our Common Agenda and how it relates to this summit, I just wanted to ask if people on a scale of 1 to 10 could share where do they feel that their current knowledge and comfort is at in relation to futures and foresight. So do you feel like you know what it is? Or do you feel like you don't? And depending on where the kind of consensus is, we'll adapt. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with futures and foresight? Okay. So we've got a 5. Okay. So sorry, I wonder if you could kick us off by sharing your definition of futures and foresight, and I'll do the same.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think we got a 5 in the chat, which I think is like a mid-level, which is relatively good. But then I would go on ahead and share my foresight journey. So I started practicing foresight professionally 2 years ago. And that actually started when I got to work on a foresight project, which is about thinking about the digital future of Nigeria in 2021. And after that, I got to like be part of NGFP, which means Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network professionally. And there I had like this idea of my project, which is about democratizing futures for farmers in Nigeria, to be precise. And what foresight is basically to me is just really being at that point where you are able to evaluate what it is that you have done in the past and then thinking about the different alternative futures that you could have, because again, we do not have just one future and nothing is written. So you get to decide which of the futures you want to play to based on whatever it is that you have created.
Perfect explanation. Yeah. And you've had much more experience in it than I do. I'm more of a networks person and a youth engagement person. But my understanding is it is very similar, that it's about having structured ways to think about how do you navigate and understand different uncertainties and drivers that could affect what the future looks like, so that you can map out potential versions of what that future could look like and plan your strategies or plan your policies to take those into consideration. So it can certainly work at an institutional level, but also I think I find incredibly empowering and powerful and inspiring about foresight is there's also very much a creative, imaginary side to it as well. So it's about not just what are the possibilities of what could happen to us, but what do we want to affect and have agency over, and what is the preferred future that we want. So there's very much a co-creative aspect to it as well. So I might just tell you a bit about the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network, and then would love to leave most space to Fisayo to share more about the work that she's been doing across different aspects of this network, because she's had her fingers in quite a few different pies within the community. So I joined the network's been running for about 5 years. There are over 600 members, and what unites all of those members, they're from 90 countries. And they're working across a range of sectors and in a range of contexts. So it sounds incredibly diverse, and it is. What unites everyone is almost everyone is under the age of 35, and that is a precondition for being part of the network, is that you are either under 35 or a very new and emerging practitioner, so you haven't been practicing for very long. And the second is that you are doing work in your community or at a systemic institutional level. So we've got those working in government, those working in multilaterals as well, towards a fairer future for current and future generations. So that's what unites everyone. But in terms of what that could look like in practice, it's hugely varied. So for example, we have Randy in California, who is designing foresight games as a way of engaging people to engage in the future of democracy in the US. And we have Rodrigo, who's in Rio de Janeiro, who's working in the favelas with children and young people who currently see themselves as not having a voice in the future of their community. He's using participatory methods to bring together young people to co-create what is the future of the community that they want, and what is a future vision of Brazil that they want to live in and feel like they belong in. And we've got Iman, who's a peer of ours who couldn't be here today and is really sorry. She's an environmental lawyer in Kenya, and she's doing a lot of work around climate and just transitions, and looking at how can we bring young people into conversations with government around what the future of climate policy in Kenya should look like. So you can see that it's very varied in terms of what the network members are doing. And the network emerged for 2 reasons 5 years ago. One is that there's a collective belief that decision-making currently is not participatory enough. Decisions that are affecting most people across the globe now, but also very much decisions that are going to impact generations to come are being made in small walls with few people, and there are not enough spaces to elevate the perspectives of younger voices, particularly not just any younger voices, but younger voices who are informed and legitimate in the sectors that they work in. The second is that the futures and foresight space itself, so the sorts of people who are working with futures and foresight, which is fast emerging as a sector as a result of the crises that we're in at the moment, and has particularly accelerated since the pandemic, has historically been very anchored in global North narratives and globally North methods. And the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network is a way to create spaces for alternative ways of thinking about the future and to celebrate those and to highlight those. So that's just a bit about why the network exists and where it's come from. And essentially it does three things in essence. One is that it identifies incredible individuals like Fisayo who are doing work already in their communities, and we aim to find those people, accelerate their work, identify resources, connect them into spaces to tell their stories, connect them with other individuals with like-minded and similar ambitions. So that's part one. Part two is that we are then interested in how can we build communities around certain agendas and clusters. So Fisayo will talk more about the work that we're doing in emerging technologies and also the work that we're doing in the climate space. And then the third one is how can we connect into systems, and how can next generation voices inform policy making and decision making. And an example of that is a collaboration we've currently got with IDRC, the Canadian government, to look at how the Development Institute, so to look at how can policymakers and researchers and technologists come together in sub-Saharan Africa to shape the emerging policy space and the regulation space around emerging tech, and what does a responsible future of technology look like. And we have a number of next generation foresight practitioners, again, of which Fisayo is one, who have been feeding into that process. So that's a bit of a sense of who we are, what we do. And then in terms of how this links to the UN's Common Agenda, this very much feeds into the broad mandate of wanting to meaningfully engage with young people. So using foresight as a space to engage young people and generate evidence of what young people want the future to look like. And we're also engaging with various coalitions on the Declaration on Future Generations ahead of the Summit of the Future in 2024. So I'll pause there because I've given you a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I'll come back at the end to share what it looks like to be involved and how you can be involved. But Fisayo, over to you to share a bit about your personal story and how you've been involved and your insights.
Thank you so much, Abby, for sharing about what NGFP does comprehensively. Now I have to beat you at that. So I would start with my personal story. So I have a background in agriculture. I am a farmer myself. And then one of the things that I've seen in my environment is the fact that many people are trapped in that circle of short-term thinking, and it got me worried. And I was looking for ways to help people in my immediate community here in Nigeria to think about what the future would likely look like. And of course, at the time, I did not have the necessary skill sets and know about like methodologies to like really help people think about futures differently. But I knew that there was a gap that needed to be filled. So I came in contact with Next Generation Foresight Practitioner by applying to the fellowship at the time. And what my project was really about was to help farmers really have agency over their future, because again, we know no future has been written, and then maybe it has also been written on the flip side. This is especially so because we get to write the type of futures that we want, then work towards that type of futures. And that was really what my project was about. And then with the NGFP network, the community so welcoming, I got to learn how to use futures tools. And then I was able to like design a number of projects and organize several workshops in my communities. And one of the projects that I also worked on was in one of the hub area, which is really on food system around grassroots stakeholder futures projects, futures process, which engage participants from Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, and South Africa to really imagine what the future of food system would look like, especially when we bring together technology in this area, what that would mean for our communities, what that would mean for value chain actors, what that would mean for even climate activists, where should we be looking at? And at the end of the day, this also like sort of translated into our work in the climate futures hub, where we're able to eventually take our work for the very first time to COP27 to introduce foresight to younger and older people. And we're able to have this intergenerational conversation at the Children and Youth Pavilion to help people think about what their preferred future would look like, what is even the probable future of climate, what is it supposed to look like, and then if we change the lens of things, what would a reframed future look like? And we're able to gather like as many interests as possible, because we had like someone that is like really old, and we had like our youngest participants being a 9-year-old telling us, oh, she was imagining a world where we would no longer have climate activities because everything around climate issue would have been resolved. And this was quite fascinating. So we told them, write a note to COP37. That's like 10 years from now, as our last year. What are the things you want to see? And this is just more or less giving these people agency about what they should be thinking about and what their role is in this work. Besides that, we have also been able to work on the data governance project, where we are thinking about what does the LD digital society, what does it look like in African context? And we had like 22 participants across Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, and a few other countries that formed like the Pan-African theme to think about what the future would look like. And we had like really young people coming together to utilize foresight tools, and it's just really magical. I think that's what I would like to call it. It's really magical to see the how creative you can get with the use of futures. It just allows you to be as creative as much as possible, and then also while also looking at actual fact and then thinking about possibilities of things, and also even going beyond possibilities of what could be, and just opening up that pathway to see the impossible and then allow us walk in that direction. And I think besides that, I don't know if Abby has been able to like share some of the link to the work that we were able to do at COP27. And we had like really amazing story, 11 scenarios of the future, which represents visions of these different people across the continent of what the future would look like. And I think I will take a pause here, and if there are like any question, we are happy to take that. Over to you now, Abby.
Perfect. I'll just wrap up quickly, but that's so inspiring for SIO, and I think really brings it to life what it can look like in different contexts. And really, I think it's about futures and foresight practices, giving young people the legitimacy and the space and the mechanisms, I think, to have really impactful intergenerational dialogues with those that are in kind of power now. And there's, other work that we're doing across the sort of intergenerational fairness space. And I just wanted to share a link in the chat as well that might be valuable to some participants. Which is some work that what I should have said is that the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network is hosted by a larger organisation, the School of International Futures, which works not only with next generation voices, but also works with leaders, works with policymakers as well. So we're currently in different parts of the organisation working to build foresight capability across the UN. We're working with different bodies at both a a global level, but also at a regional level to build foresight capability and think about how foresight can be useful for connecting into our common agenda, and one of the kind of other pieces of the work that SWAF does is around intergenerational fairness. So a couple of years ago, we developed, in collaboration with the Portuguese government and the Gulbenkian Foundation, an intergenerational fairness assessment matrix, which essentially enables anyone, and it's public, it's a public good, it's open source, enables anyone in any government context or indeed other contexts to use this assessment matrix to essentially understand, on a scale of extremely unfair to extremely fair, what does the impact of a decision have on current and future generations. So is it significantly disadvantaging current generations and future generations if a policy was to be passed or a decision was to be made? And that's been incredibly powerful. We've used it in lots of different contexts with the Social Mobility Foundation in the UK, Social Mobility Commission, sorry, in the UK. We've used it with different bills in the UK. We've worked with Open Society foundations to look at the Green New Deal using this framework as well. So it can be used by anyone, and definitely if you're interested, please reach out and we can speak more about how you could use that in your contexts. We're also doing some work around building a national strategy for the next generations in the UK as well. So I'll see if I can find, I'll find a link to that in a second, but that's really about engaging young people, both at a community level, to host dialogues with their communities around the future that they want, but then also to use some of those visions to feed into a broader policy-making conversation that we're having with the Foreign Office and with the Cabinet Office in the UK around what is the future of the UK's role internationally, and how can we bring next generation perspectives into that conversation. So I'm going to pause there and just say finally that we do have our applications for the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Fellowship open now. It's open until June. We definitely welcome applications. You're very welcome to reach out to us if you want more information, and we've got some workshops and some Q&As coming up to share more about it. But I'm conscious we're coming up to the 25-minute past mark, so I wanted to pause there just to see if there were any reflections or questions before we sign off.
Thank you so much, Abby and Fisayo. I feel like you have a very wide network and a very cohesive as well as essential list of topics that you've covered for our generation. Thank you for also sharing the link. You might find my own name applying for this, but I had a question for Fisayo actually. You mentioned a data analysis, a data governance survey, I believe. And I just wanted to hear, I was hoping you could elaborate a bit more on that. What's the methodology? Is there a hypothesis there as well? And yeah, if you could just share more information about the same with the rest of us so we can understand what kind of data practices you're using for the survey. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. So for the data governance, we looked at what the future of LD digital future societies would look like in Africa. And the process was a group futures process, which was like bringing different foresight tools and methodologies together just to be able to synthesize as many information as possible, to think through what are like the history that we have on how certain technologies are being used, what would the future of such technologies look like, and then how can we ensure that it is suit for purpose for the society in like an LD way. And we looked at it from the aspect of the political landscape, we looked at it from the climate. We had like a team in Kenya that was focused on what the future of climate will look like in Kenya. We had something around mental health as well. We also had something around what do we call it now? Electioneering process and all of those things. Youth engagement was also another area that we had this data work around. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat again because we had like as many stories, and on this link, in this link as well, you would also be able to find the methodology, what were like the tools that inform the process, some of the outcomes that we have, people that were involved, and all of those things. It is just really packed with so much information that I can cover in like a minute or two. So please feel free to go through the link as well. I'm going to be sharing the link to the project again in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To all our participants, if you have any comments, interventions, or any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and even raise your hand. Our two co-hosts will also recognize you at the moment. Fisayo, thank you for sharing the link on the chat to the data governance portal. You can find it there. And in the meanwhile, I'll just ask a small question to Abby, if that'll be okay. Since you are, as you mentioned, handling the communications for this network, where do you feel the most common challenges arise for them, for youth leaders, for people like Fisayo and others? And how does the School of International Futures help navigate those challenges and limitations?
Yeah, great question. And I think I would bracket the challenges into probably four. I think there are challenges that actually accessing high quality support, learning and learning around futures and foresight is either elite and expensive, or i.e. you can do a foresight masters. Of course you can in many parts of the world, but that's not accessible to many of the members within our community. So I think accessing high quality support and a peer-to-peer learning community is definitely one challenge that people come in with. So that's one of the kind of ways that we seek to support members, is by offering support and bringing people together to learn. So that's one. I think secondly, futures and foresight work, when it's being done in a transformative way, either at a community level or at a broader scale, can be seen as quite radical and can be quite seen as quite dangerous in some contexts, particularly if speaking against the status quo is not socially acceptable. So one of the things we're really conscious of is the duty of care that we need to hold within the network, of making sure that we're neither exposing network members nor putting them in positions that don't feel safe, but also providing those kind of safe spaces to share and to work together, particularly when there might be a shared kind of agenda that feels quite radical or quite out there. And we do promote that because the future needs to look different than just an extension of today. The third is a resource question. So many individuals coming to the network are doing this work very much as a side hustler on the side, but don't have the resources to be able to do this full time. So trying to bring people together to access either work opportunities, funding opportunities, sponsorship opportunities is something that we try to do. And then the fourth one's related to power. So many members feel frustrated coming into the network that they have potential visions and ideas about what the future of a particular sector in their country could look like, but don't necessarily have the networks to be able to take those ideas to those that are in decision-making spaces. So SWAF and the NGFP network looks to try and convene and broker those spaces to bring opportunities. So yeah, but for Sai, that's probably, I don't know if that's how that would resonate with you.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. It does resonate with me. And I think a practical example that I would give was my journey into foresight and how I came in really crowed with the whole idea of there should be something about futures thinking. And I came in into NGFP, and I was given the skills that I needed. One of the things that I was also empowered with was having like this transformational training, high-level training actually, that I got to be a part of by virtue of being a member of the network. It was like a 6-week virtual training on foresight, and you get to break it down into the tiniest bit, and then getting to understand it at the high level, and then the practicability of it, you get to work on like the project and all of those things. And I think that's one thing that NGFP provides, that support that you need to be able to thrive. And if you are looking for any community that can equip you with all that you need to like run a successful project, you know, have successful workshop and all, and I think you should be a part of the NGFP network, because that is the community you want to belong to be able to have like a successful journey. I mean, I moved from not knowing anything about foresight practically to being like a UNICEF Foresight Fellow. You can only, you know, aspire to be more by being part of the network. So there is just so much that is the network is packed with. The people there are so amazing, and I'm really hoping that many people from listening to us right now also get to, you know, apply or just join our mailing list at the very least to get to know about amazing opportunities and all that the network has to offer.
Thank you so much, Fisayo and Abby from the School of International Futures. Their links are in the chat and can be utilized. If you could also share them with me, I'll try and make sure that I can share it with our larger network. Thank you so much for being here with us at the Global Futures Forum today.
Thank you, and congrats, and wishing you all the best, and look forward to meeting some of you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye for now. Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, and here is the JUS Pavilion finally or not?
Sorry?
The JUS speakers will be here.
The Youth Pavilion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and you are getting started now?
We're just getting started now. Are you able to zoom in on us?
So it's gonna do that automatically, pretty much.
Okay. I'm a bit backlit. But...
And we have next with us Peace Child International. We have Francesca Reynolds, and we have Mr. David Wolcombe with us. This session will dive into Peace Child International's work in engaging and mobilizing schools, universities, businesses, councils, political leaders, and communities in preparation for the Summit of the Future through multiple initiatives. Over to you guys.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to this session. Yes, in the chat, we will be putting links, which I will send to the organizers here, to the materials that we're going to talk about. But first, maybe just a little bit of background about my organization, Peace Child International, and then Francesca will talk a little bit about IMPART, and so you'll hear where we're coming from. Peace Child is 43 years old, and we have been working to empower young people to first inform themselves about the global challenges that they will face in their lifetimes, and then to advise them on what are the most effective actions they can take to address those challenges. And one of the biggest opportunities that has come down the pike to enable them to address those challenges is this UN Summit of the Future. And the last time that we saw such a big opportunity was the Rio Plus 20 event in 2012. And before that, the Rio Plus 10 and the original Rio Earth Summit. And so we've been involved since that whole trajectory of work on the movement towards creating a sustainable world. And frankly, we haven't done very well because I really don't think the schools and the universities have yet stepped up to the plate to put education for sustainability, green skills, green job skills, green entrepreneurship opportunities at the heart of the curriculum. So what Peace Child is doing is setting up a number of ways that young people can have constructive conversations with their elders, with their peers, about how they're going to crack these incredibly huge and complex challenges that are barreling down the pike towards them in their lifetimes. But just a final word of explanation. The words Peace Child refer to a musical play, which is where we started way back in 1982 with this musical called Peace Child, which we performed at the Royal Albert Hall in London, Kennedy Center in Washington, DC, Children's Theatre in Moscow, and all over the United States and around the world, in fact. And it's a story set in the future, where the world is at peace, the environment is on the mend, HIV/AIDS, disease, distant memory, and the world is as we would like it to be. And the challenge of Peace Child is that we then flash back and invite the children of the cast, the young people of the cast, who can be any age from sort of 10 to 15 to 20, 21, 22, young people, to explore what they're going to do with their lives to bring about the world of the future. So the Summit of the Future basically extends that process to enable them to articulate and figure out what are they going to do with their lives, what are they going to do with their careers to make sure that they're not a part of the problem, but a big part of the solution. And the four things that we're actually looking at in that regard is, first of all, a youth sustainability action forum, which is where we challenge young people to come up with sustainability action programs in their communities that they can actually do themselves, so that when they talk to politicians about advancing sustainable policies, they can say, look, this is what we're doing. Now, what are you going to do? Because we found young people are actually rather bored by all the sort of blah, blah, blah that goes on at these big conferences. They want to do things. They want to have a school farm, have an ecological project about transportation or something in their community. So we want to encourage that. And so we've done a number of these sustainability action forums, and Francesca's going to help us with the one we're doing this year in Luton, a town in England. But that's something that you can do in your hometown very easily. It's pretty much cost-free and is a good way of getting young people to get active and draw in their community to their actions. And the second thing is an intergenerational conversation cafe, because it's really important for young people to inform themselves about the state of the planet and about the challenge of having a United Nations that works for everyone, a system of global governance that actually protects and regenerates the natural environment, the biosphere, the natural capital that we have. And that should be something that is led by young people. And so that's the kind of intergenerational cafe that we've been doing. And we have one of these happening in a school. Again, it's entirely youth-led, but the young people have experts, elders, people of my age to come in and advise and comment on their ideas, their plans, their solutions. And I feel that we've got to be intergenerational about this. We're all in this together. And then citizens' assemblies are a great way of looking at the demographic of a local community and creating a jury that reflects that demographic, age-wise, gender-wise, racial, economic backgrounds, and so on. And having a model jury of that, plus an audience of everyone who's interested, to look at these same issues and come up with solutions. They should be single issues. But a model citizen assembly is a fairly unique concept, but it's a great way to get a whole community discussing these problems. And then finally, we've adapted the Peace Child play to a forum theater, an interactive performance, where it starts in the future like every other Peace Child play. The world's at peace, everything's fine, flashback to the present, everything's not fine. And we use the Peace Child as situation room, which we're developing with Generation Unlimited here at the United Nations, so that young people have a really clear sense of the perilous state of the planet that we're in right now, and start taking action themselves to find out what are we doing. And they interviewed various different people, business leaders, advertising executives, NGO activists, campaigners, politicians, diplomats, UN servants, faith leaders, And all these people actually don't have the solutions. And they get so frustrated, they decide to ask the audience, well, what would you do? And so it becomes like this sort of intergenerational conversation cafe, but with the context of a performance in which many, many people have not been able to give them the solution. And the play ends with the young people of the cast weaving the ideas of the audience into the final 3 scenes of the play, where they get back to a future which is fine and sustainable, and the environment is protected and the natural biosphere is being regenerated, which is where we all need to get to. So these are just 4 techniques which we're developing, but let me pass over to Francesca, who will tell you about Impart, which is one of our latest partner organizations, and we're looking to work closely together to develop educational outreach to really transform the hearts and minds of the public, who have to accept that these challenges are hard, but that if we can adapt a United Nations that's fit for the 21st century and capable of addressing these challenges collectively, then we can solve them. So, Francesca.
Yeah, so I set up Impart not too long ago, definitely not 40-something years ago, to provide accessible education to lots of people. I personally didn't come from a background where political education was particularly available, and so it's something I wanted to provide for other people and get people into politics and debating in particular, because that was the route that I took to getting into politics. And I think it's just generally an excellent way to get involved and become able to, you know, do lots of things, talk in lots of places. With that in mind, at the moment we operate significantly in schools, so we provide debate societies, resources, and also politics lessons and resources. There are 2 kind of unique things that we do that other organizations don't do quite as much, which is that the resources are for use by teachers, but technically without teachers. So what I mean is that they're used in schools. We don't go into schools that regularly. We do so maybe once every term, but we're not kind of a significant feature in schools, so that we don't have a huge overhead in terms of cost. But our resources are significantly for students to use themselves. Teachers, if they feel the need to, they can use them, but they don't kind of rely on teacher involvement, which just means that it's very student-led learning. And it means that it's also incredibly scalable. We can send our resources to anyone. That also includes internationally. The format of debating that we teach is the International World Schools Debate format, which also means that if anyone potentially listening in wants to find out more about debating and potentially help get debating into schools near where they are, or in fact very far away from where they are, as I said, the nature of the resources means all they need is access to a Google Drive folder in order to use those. So we're doing a lot in terms of political education, with the idea of then using that to get more people into politics and encouraging them to engage with things like the Global Futures Forum and other things that are available. As David said, we'll be working together on the Sustainability Forum in Luton, and yeah, doing some more stuff in schools and getting young people who wouldn't normally be able to access political education into these places. But also the GFF, we've been doing some stuff here, so anyone who's in attendance or has received the emails, you'll have seen our 2 one-pages. And so another part of what we're trying to do is not just in schools, but also kind of events that are out there, organizations that are out there that are doing really cool things, making resources available so that people can understand what's going on and access it when they previously might not have been able to, because we all know that UN and lots of other international organizations love some complex jargon. So getting rid of some of that can often make a big difference in terms of having people properly engaged. So we do that as well.
So yeah, making this information accessible, I guess, is what we're both concerned with. But the other thing which I think is really important that you bring to the table, Francesca, in everything that we do, young people need to be able to present themselves and have the confidence to stand and project their voice, you know, and be heard and create a coherent argument, or in the case of the Peace Child play, a stimulating, coherent scene that is interesting to watch. And I find, I don't know about you, but so many young people are just not taught those skills, let alone how to make a PowerPoint or, you know, to make these amazing aids that you can get from your laptop and are now amazingly available. So teaching young people to present these arguments. You know, what we're discussing here at the GFF are life and death issues. And if you had to argue for life, you need to know how to do it and present yourself. And so I think we're both involved. That's where we sort of come together, isn't it?
Thank you so much, Francesca, Mr. David Wilcombe. If there are any questions or interventions or comments from our online audience and participants, please feel free to unmute your mic, share them now, or even raise your hands and share them with us. And in the meanwhile, I would just like to ask both of you, as someone who I would like to consider myself a part of the youth that are trying to inculcate some more change in our own areas of interest, in our own respective ways. Some of the things that stand in the way, like you said, are the adequate resources to be able to present ourselves. The resources to even access platforms where we can express our issues. A lot of us also do not get assistance, funding, or even something as basic as stipend for our research, which becomes a massive issue for a lot of people, a lot of young people, in particular when they want to move, when they want to transfer their knowledge from one place to another. Otherwise, they remain confined to one geographical space. So where do you see the future of the youth, or how important you think it is, and what is Peace Child's contribution to pushing for these resources to be made available to more and more diverse groups of the youth across the world?
We have talked about this for 43 years. Youth is an amazingly under-resourced sector of this problem. And if you look at the well-resourced sectors, like the military, like the health service, like the education, school, university services, they have effectively monetized their advocacy. And I've been saying this for a long, long time. What you're describing needs a business plan, and it needs a funding stream. And those funding streams are available from government, from philanthropists, but it needs to be very, very clear with deliverables and with goal setting and a whole evidence-based approach. And I think youth are well able to create a really bold, courageous program of transformative education of their generation to be able to acquire the skills globally. And I think you're talking particularly about the Global South. And in the GFF, I'm disappointed about the absence of the Global South. And I seriously wonder if the Summit of the Future can happen in any meaningful way without the serious buy-in of the Global South to the goals of creating a UN that works, because most young people in the Global South don't care about what's happening in, distance conference room XYZ at the UN headquarters. That's just not on their radar. And yet their lives depend on it, as ours do here in the Global North too. So I think there is a really, really strong rationale, a business plan to be created to generate the funding streams that can really allow both online participation, which I think is much more eco-friendly than flying troops of young people to New York. And that's, we did that, 30 years ago. And I think we should have grown out of that because it's deeply uneco-friendly. It's very expensive. And I think that, a new generation will be doing it all on Zoom and Teams and everything. So these new techniques need to be worked out, costed. I think the collaboration of young people is so much easier than, and what are we doing? I mean, Peace Child is trying to put together a program for the Summit of the Future where we get young people from the P5 member states, from every other regional grouping, ASEAN, African Union, Mercosur, so that all those young people from each region, including the small island states, come together to do a performance of Peace Child here in the United Nations that shows how we weave in all the ideas that come out of the GFF and the People's Pact for the Future, plus the ideas that are outlined in the government's Pact for the Future, and show how, they see that working to create the world we want, the future we want, by 2050, 2070. And that's a performance that we hope we will do here at the UN and be replicated in every UN member state, based on the information that the UN gathers endlessly, but keeps in deep, dark spreadsheets and files that are completely impenetrable to normal mortals, but actually contains the information that we all need to know in order to be able to survive to the end of this century. So that's a really inclusive way. And I think what your benefit is now in your generation, the death of distance. We're talking to these people and they could be on the other side of the planet. And we don't have to pay, 40 quid a minute on phone calls as I had to in the early part of my life, and booking a call 4 days in advance to talk to Beijing. That is over. We are now united as a single planet. And you need to take advantage of that collaboration to, yes, generate funding streams, but also take advantage of the technology that you have to build a global family.
Absolutely. It feels good to know that you think about the situation of the global South and the youth as it is, and that you have found Peace Child as a very expressive, artistic, and somatic form of talking about the world's problems as they are. We also have a very enthusiastic group of youth online with us right now. Jin Tanaka from the UNISC, who came up with a very, very comprehensive plan, which I'm hoping that you will be able to share with Mr. David Wilcombe here, Jin, which talks about youth outreach to more regions, youth outreach for rural development across the globe, and youth outreach, more importantly, directly with the channels of organizations and different treaty bodies that exist in this world, so that the youth can, in and of itself, provide its ideas. My closing question is for Francesca. How would you describe you came about forming or helping with the formation of IMPART, and how much work do you think there is left to do in terms of political education in the area that at least you feel you operate in?
Yeah, so I mean, I could talk for a while about how it came about. There's quite a long story, but I think the essence of it is mostly just from my own experience of trying to get into politics and debating. So I went to a very typical state school in the UK. My family are probably about the average income, not huge, nothing. But in my high school, there was like one politics lesson my entire time. So there was just no formal political education at all. And during that one political education, the teacher told us like the wrong election result in a certain year. And I had to like kind of put my hand up and be like, oh, no, it's her. And I think at that time I was frustrated by it. I then got into competitive debating by like going to a private school, not actually attending there, but they said they would train me if I competed for them. That's an odd setup. But I was always very aware that the way that I got into politics was based purely on luck and being, invited to a charity open day at a big private school at the right time. And so that very much formed my own kind of understanding that the world of politics and debating often isn't made particularly available to people. And I think that's something that, people understand in being in the spaces that we operate in. It's not always the most diverse, particularly in terms of wealth and kind of parental background. I think particularly in the UK kind of political scene, almost everyone that's in it, went to one of maybe 3 or 4 schools. Most of them have a parent who was in some way involved either in politics, banking or law. And so it's a very closed off world. And I think kind of being able to crack into it made me want to do something about it. I'm aware we probably only have 1 minute left, so if there's any other questions or anything else.
Yeah, thank you so much to the both of you. And as we will move forward to our next session, which is going to begin exactly at 2, I believe this session leaves us with one very important question, which is, when we say the summit of the future, we should ask ourselves, the future for who? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.